Let's talk about Chiron. Now, Chiron as a mythological figure makes me really happy. I like Chiron. In my chart, Chiron actually is closely conjunct to planets, so I do have a close relationship with Chiron. But the issue that I have is that Chiron, of all of the asteroids, has suddenly made it into the automatic settings or default settings of even our free chart websites. So if you go onto something like astro.com, and I think even astroseek.com, which is the one I recommend the most, you will find that Chiron is on there. It looks kind of like a little key. It's got a circle, a line, and then like a V, kind of like a K coming out of it. So I don't know, it's a bad example, but it looks like that. And if you see that on your chart, that's what the symbolic representation of Chiron is. Now, why astrologers suddenly chose Chiron, I don't know. And I will research this more. Maybe we'll do a Chiron part 2 at some point. But let me tell you what Chiron is. So Chiron is actually a dead comet. So it's the composition of a comet nucleus, which is just whatever's left over after a comet runs out of steam. So it's basically an asteroid, but it used to be a comet. And that means it's tiny. It comes in from way out there, goes around, and then its orbit takes like 60-ish years. So in human design and stuff, you'll hear a lot about Chiron returns. This irks me a little bit because why are we worrying about a Chiron return when there are so many other things, including things that are going on around the same time, like your second Saturn return, that are more likely to be giving you better information as to how you can actually work with the situation. My gripe about the way human design incorporates Chiron returns, especially if you're a projector like me, which is probably why I have a problem with it, is that they say until your Chiron return, you're sitting there. And I think this is actually a line 2 or 6 or something in human design. I am certified in understanding human design, but I don't agree with it because I feel, and this is my personal opinion, that the person who created it, not the people who practice it now, but the person who created it just really appropriated a lot of other divinatory techniques, mushed them together, and then said, this is how you raise your children. And I'm not a fan of that. And also the history of it is a former advertiser went to Ibiza and channeled something over 5 days, but we don't get anything else more than that. It's just trust this guy. And I don't because I'm a Scorpio moon, right? So I've read the books. I've reached out to sources. I've said, hey, is there more to this? And they're like, no, we just trust this guy who renamed himself to be Ra Uruhu. And that can work for some people. And I know that it does offer some information that validates some people. And this is not a human design rant, but it's kind of sidetracking that way. And so the thing that really confused me as I was investigating human design was that you have to wait for this Chiron return. And I'm like, why are we giving so much weight to Chiron when there are so many other planetary bodies? Like, I feel like it's spreading the focus so thin that it's actually causing more confusion because you can't actually say, oh, hi, Saturn, I see you're working with me right now. I'm willing to cooperate. It's just saying, oh, well, you're stuck. Wait until you're 60 or so, and then maybe things will get better. And I know even in certain circumstances of comparing people with different, even human design things, but also their chart, that you can get stuff done. And I don't like the box that it tends to put people in. So when we look at Chiron and say, well, why Chiron? Honestly, there's not much of a reason why Chiron, to my knowledge, because Chiron is a small body that is an old comet, and it represents the wounded healer. Why? Chiron represents the wounded healer, and this is legit. It represents the wounded healer because Chiron in mythology is actually the mythological figure who really helped to develop pharmacy for healing, trained heroes like Achilles and all that stuff. If you think about the Disney movie of Hercules and you think about Phil represents Chiron. Chiron was a centaur, not a satyr, but artistic license, I guess. Eventually, Chiron was immortalized as Sagittarius, the other centaur that we know in the sky. So Chiron was immortalized in that sense, which is really cool. Again, when you go back to the Hercules movie and think about being written in the stars and think like, Phil, you actually get to be there yourself. Wow. But back to Chiron. Chiron is really cool because he is the wounded healer. He trains heroes. He makes sure that your mess becomes your message, or, all of those things. Your pain becomes your power. Those things that get really important. And I think My theory from experience, and I would vet this with other people when I have a chance, but my theory is that because of the theme of wounded healer, the New Age movement really liked this. And so it became a whole thing of, I've been through so much, but if I can make my mess my message, here's where I'm going to go. So Chiron got really popular in astrology, likely in the 80s to 90s, as the whole Project Hindsight was still translating our Hellenistic texts and giving us more to work with. So this is a residual from the astrology that was most prominent in the 70s up to the 90s. Again, Chiron is a valid thing. It's a valid placement. My gripe is Chiron is an asteroid. If you're going to get into asteroid work, which I do some of, and Demetra George pioneers, right? So it is valid. It can be incorporated into traditional astrology. They couldn't see them at the time, so they didn't know about them. We imagine if they did know about them, how would they incorporate them? And we do our best with that. And it's actually working really well. Chiron is, and apologies if this kind of bothers some people a little bit. Doesn't bother me. There are 4 other asteroids that are the primary asteroids. You have Ceres, you have Pallas Athena. I'm gonna have to remember all of them, but I probably won't be able to in this moment. Anyway, there's Ceres, there's Athena, there's 2 other ones, and I can't believe I'm not remembering them. I'm gonna Google them so I can come up with them. But while I'm Googling them, the thing that I have there, oh, for real? Mercury's getting me here. It literally like copy and pasted a bunch of other stuff. There we go. So the 4 major asteroids, Ceres, Pallas, they're saying Hygeia. That's not true. Juno and Vesta. Ceres, Pallas, Juno, and Vesta. These are all goddess deities. The cool thing about asteroids is they finally introduced feminine deity energies, where in traditional astrology, we only have the moon. Thank you, Gabe. Gabe, hi. Yes, Ravage HD. Hi, Gabe. Thank you. We got there. So we're in astrology. And Gabe, if you want to add in your ideas on why Chiron became such a big deal, I would love that. I consider you a really great resource for getting some other opinions. But where we finally had some female energies coming in, because prior to this we had the moon, who was also a sect-light, so that was like not as heavy of a if you want to attribute something feminine, you only had Venus. Venus had to rule all of those things. Now, even though asteroids can add a lot of nuance to a situation, I don't throw them into like an original natal promise until I'm ready to layer over some other nuances to make sure like all of these things are there in the fate and the fortune. Now let's talk about the lifestyle and some of the archetypes that are showing up in the life. That's where the asteroids come in. And we finally get our more feminine deities being represented. And of all of the ones that got thrown into a chart, it's Chiron, not because he's a bad dude, but because he's just another masculine figure that they put into a chart before allowing these 4 options, at least one of them, to be represented. Makes me a little sad. Chiron is the wounded healer. That's awesome. It does do really cool things. See if it's aspecting something in a really close way in your chart. Let's say between 1 to 3 degrees, conjunct something is going to really pop off. But also, why not at least if you're going to do that, and I know it clutters the chart, if you work with asteroids and fixed stars and all the things, your chart becomes incomprehensibly busy, which is why it helps to layer things in, to do one thing first, then look at this once you have an understanding, and then look at this. And it kind of works in phases, which is why it takes me like an hour and a half to prepare a chart for a consultation. But it's worth it because you get so much context. So where Chiron is the wounded healer, for sure, the placement of Chiron just randomly does not need to be there any more than the other asteroids do. So my gripe, my rant would be, why did we pick Chiron when we have so many other deities that we could choose from? The primary ones also finally giving voice to some feminine aspects of the pantheons. I don't know. I really don't know, other than the fact that perhaps in the New Age movement, the idea of making your mess your message, becoming the wounded healer, appealed to people who were in the New Age movement, who were in that mindset and really enjoying the idea of taking that. I do think the wounded healer stuff is the main thing with Chiron's popularity, along with the novelty. Yeah, cool. So it sounds like I'm on a similar track as other thinkers with this. Thank you, Gabe, as always. So to me, Yes, it's important. Yes, it's valid. Yes, I do look at it as a point. Yes, it's valid, or it's prominent in my own chart. Is it any more important than the other 4 or more? Um, no. And yeah, Gabe, I talked about how Chiron sort of becomes Sagittarius in the myth. But again, does that mean that it should be on the chart as a default setting for people who are just encountering astrology on like astro.com and stuff? To me, I don't think so. I think you should be able to kind of turn on asteroids, and that you should then be able to see some and work with it from there. We need better functions when it comes to asteroid work. Programs, and there are more and more, they are coming, but we need something that services asteroid work better because there are so many of them and they can be all over the place. Right now, we work with an asteroid ephemeris, and you just have to look for the points in your chart and see if any of them match up to, literally there's over 2,000 asteroids that are named right now. So there's a lot to work with, which means there's a lot of opportunity for things to show up in your chart for sure. But we are still in a space where the programs and the ability to find them and really locate them is difficult. When I had a consultation with Demetra 2 weeks ago, I was aware, because I've done workshops on asteroids with Demetra, I was aware of some of the asteroids in my chart. She found some that I'd always missed. And I was like, geez, there's even more. And they did have meaning. So again, it brings a really great way to give some nuance into the archetypes of what you live through. Chiron does this as well. I would not say in my experience, though, that he does it any better than the other ones. And it would be nice to see some of those other energies given a little bit more front and center if we're going to do that at all. But like I said, my opinion is, let's do it by layers. If we're going to do it this way, there's like a strata of astrology that we could get into, where you get into the natal promise using the original 7 planets. And then maybe on top of that, you do the transpersonal planets of, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And then on top of that, you can say, okay, I know all this now. Are there any asteroids that are doing something? And even before that, you would probably get into the fixed stars. So there's a lot to work with in astrology. There's a lot of options for you to be able to follow if you're interested. But if you do want to schedule a chat with me, and if you have an asteroid in mind or a deity in mind that you want me to look for specifically, you can either tell me during the consultation or beforehand in the form that you get to fill out, and I'll do some extra study beforehand when I prepare your chart. You can schedule a consultation with me through my website, and it will be there for you. Layered mapping would be nice. I'm telling you, I think the Chepso is doing something similar to this. I will be helping to beta test that as soon as they release the beta, and I look forward to it. But in the meantime, thank you guys for being here. Let me know what you want me to rant about next, either in the comments of this video or otherwise. I have some ideas. I am willing to rant about anything that I feel like I am equipped to rant on. And peer review to me is always appreciated.